Welcome to I Wrote This Song for You. I'm Wells Hanley. In this podcast, I interview people from all walks of life. Some of them I've known for a long time, some I've just met. We share a conversation, I listen to their story, and then I respond with a song. Let's meet today's guest and hear their song. I have a very strange and unusual and wonderful aunt named Tookie. The circumstances around this episode may seem grave. I don't think death is really something we like to talk about much, but this story has a twist. And I think that one of Tookie's dying wishes is that her episode might shake something loose in you, just enough to make room for some new insights about our shared problem of impermanence. A few months ago, I got a phone call from my father, letting me know that his older sister, my Aunt Tookie, had been moved into home hospice and likely had between 2 and 6 months to live. To make matters worse, her husband of 47 years, my Uncle Royce, had just died about 2 weeks before. My dad was calling also to ask me if I'd be willing to interview Tookie and write her a song. I knew this was a big project and one that would take a lot of time and consideration, and I understood that there was a good chance that Tookie would never get to hear whatever song I wrote for her. Of course, I said yes, and I scheduled a day as soon as possible to head to Greensboro to meet with Tookie. The twist, which I learned on the phone with Tookie just days before our meeting, is that she was planning to have her funeral before she died. It would be a celebration for both her and Royce, but she was clear that she wanted her friends and family to speak about her as though she was dead while she sat and listened. She didn't say this, but I understood that she wanted my song to be part of that celebration. Tookie has always been the eccentric one in the family, kind of a black sheep. My most vivid memory of Thanksgiving dinners at my grandparents' house as a kid was Tookie holding court, while all 20 or so of us would become guinea pigs in some new and immersive team-building technique she was cooking up. She had crafted a career as a motivational speaker and a social work trainer, which was a perfect channel for her zany and unconventional outlook on life. Though I've known her all my life, our interview was the only time we'd ever spent together one-on-one. We sat and talked for almost 5 hours, and I extracted the parts that I thought were the most poignant to share with you. Following our conversation, I'll play you her song. So before I'm dead, please get it into your head that the sky is not falling down and the king has got no clothes. Today's song, Before I Go, is written and performed by me, Wells Hanley. This show runs entirely on contributions from listeners like you, so stay tuned to the end of the episode to learn how you can join in and help. Tell me again, I've never been told the exact plan. You mentioned over the phone something about wanting to have a service before you die.
Yes.
Okay.
The idea of getting to hear good stuff while you're still alive, it's always wasted on the dead.
Right.
And I would rather hear it now.
So the service will be for Royce, but also for you?
Yeah. It'll be a send-off.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing, a fantasy to see your own funeral, so to speak. It's not much of a funeral, but it will be all the things I'd want out of a funeral.
Right. That's a beautiful idea. I have to tell you, I have carried that idea myself. And I actually might have gotten it from you, and I don't know it, but I have a distinct memory of being at Bob's funeral, your dad, my grandfather. I have a memory of being at that funeral. I remember the church, and I remember you speaking, and I remember sitting there and having the thought, why do we have funerals after people are gone? And I think part of what made me think that was that my dad, I think, gave a speech.
He definitely did.
And he gave a speech that was moving.
Very
it was moving to me.
It's moving to me as well.
And I remember thinking, why? I think part of what he said was like, I never told my dad this, but, and then he spoke about the emotional connection that was like under the surface for them, but they didn't talk that way, right? But I remember having the thought, like, why don't we do this when the person's alive?
I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, I think it's hard to talk person to person. We tend to triangulate. Instead of telling you how wonderful you are, I'm more likely to tell maybe your dad.
Right.
Or your sister or someone else. Mm-hmm. I think it's too intimate to praise someone else face to face.
Yeah, and we all have an arsenal of defenses of how to like deflect that when it's uncomfortable, right? Like, oh no, you're just being, or you're so sweet, you're so kind, you know, and then you deflected it.
I like the notion of people doing something, although it may be non-traditional and slightly uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I delight in that as a way to maybe make people more aware of the foolishness, particularly of the way we funeralize people. In the white culture, we hold up well, we don't cry, we get it over with.
Yeah,
I think it's very uncomfortable for people. And I don't see any reason to be uncomfortable about dying and uncomfortable about death. I mean, we're all going to do it. Stupid people die all the time. And I figured that if they could do it, I can do it too.
Yeah. And
once I decided that this was perhaps an opportune time to move on, then all I could do was plan.
Was part of your decision that now is a good time? I mean, it must be a lot of things coming together. I mean,
yeah. Well,
what are the things that figure into that? Like, why does that seem like the obvious choice?
I have enjoyed over 20 years of terrible health, hideous array of life-threatening diseases. So when I got a cancer diagnosis, I thought, well, this is a good time to go. Mm-hmm. So rather than possibly living an extra year, probably in pain from chemo and radiation, I mean, where's the fun in that?
Yeah, right.
So when they gave me a diagnosis, I thought, well, this is the time to prepare and just to accept it, my turn.
And did you make that decision before Royce passed?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Royce has always been the sicker one. He's enjoyed bad health longer and more than I have.
Enjoyed it more, yeah.
When he discovered that I had been given a diagnosis of 3 to 6 months, it just became too much for him. Mm-hmm. And bless his heart, I feel as though perhaps he passed away to make way for me, so that our caregiver, Jerry, could concentrate on me. I think Royce came to that decision himself when his plan for living after I died was to eat biscotti and order pizza from Domino's. And when he realized that biscotti and Jerry weren't going to be a reality,
he wouldn't let him do it.
He decided, well, maybe I believe I ought to die. Right. And I know that sounds heartless, but I do believe that it was his gift to me, because he was very ill. He wasn't going to live without me.
Yeah.
Once I decided to die, I was fine with that. And I was in your face about it. I use the word die a lot.
Wasn't that part of your job, like putting out there the truth in a way that people don't normally think about it?
Absolutely.
And upsetting the assumptions to help people, I don't know, see things more in alignment with reality?
Disturb the comfortable, comfort the disturbed.
Is that a saying? Is that a famous saying?
Yes, it is. I think it's Thomas Aquinas.
Wow.
And it says, disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. And so I've always felt like disturbing the comfortable, if I can shake people just a little bit, they maybe will think of a different way.
Yeah.
They might not think of it until later when they're taking a shower, or maybe even a year or so later go, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to shake up people's notions of just because we did it before is no reason to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes people think I'm imposing on their belief system that things should be done the way they've always been done, and here you disrespect that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, of course I disrespect that, because there's got to be other ways to do things. This doesn't seem to make any sense to me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy making people think things a different way,
Mm-hmm.
even if it embarrasses them.
Mm-hmm. So you enjoy making people uncomfortable.
Yes, I do. I enjoy making people uncomfortable so they shake them up enough to look a little differently about what's going on.
Yeah.
My mother said that as a young child, I had an uncanny knack for saying something uncomfortable, particularly around her adult friends.
Which
And
was,
that
of course,
I
a
seemed
compliment.
to know what would embarrass people the most without hurting them, but with them just realizing, oh, yeah, that was kind of stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And she said as a child, I drove her crazy doing that.
Do you feel like you came in with that, or is there a role model?
I could read before I could walk is the urban legend. You know, we all have childhood legends that we're not sure are true. Mm-hmm. And there's a picture of me at about a year old, my first trip out in the snow. I look like a little space person with all my clothes, and I'm sitting in a couple inches of snow with a book, reading a book.
Wow.
And I think I could walk, but they say I was very slow at walking, but very fast at reading. It's still true. Once you laugh, whatever's bothering you loses its hold. I don't think you can solve a problem or resolve an issue until you can laugh about it. Mm-hmm. And the faster you can laugh, the less it bothers you. And if you can laugh in the middle of a crisis, suddenly it just loosens your ability to move, because frequently we're paralyzed by fear or dread or nervousness. Mm-hmm. A person who laughs who is depressed is not depressed if you can make them laugh. Mm. They'll fall back into depression, perhaps,
sure,
but just for a minute or two. Mm-hmm. The laughter itself makes people think out of the box. Mm-hmm. And that strikes me as the most delightful way to deal with problems. Mm-hmm. You can't solve them necessarily,
right?
Although you can redefine them.
Right. And
in my business, that was very important.
And that's part of what's behind the way you're approaching death. Is that
yes,
there's a lightness.
I decided that I had enough sicknesses, and I gave it a lot of thought. Mm-hmm. You're pondering your end. I gave that a tremendous amount of thought and a tremendous amount of tears as well.
Sure.
So, but once I made a decision, I'm going to pretend that this is easy. I like to call that tin-liking.
What's that?
So you tin-like, you can do something. And if you tin-like, you know what you're doing. You can start being able to do it. You work yourself into it. I tended like I'm okay dying, and now I am.
Mm-hmm. Just fake it till you make it,
I don't think
right?
I really felt that way at first.
Sure. But you made a decision. You looked at all of the possible routes forward, and you said, this looks like the best one.
Absolutely. I mean, it really didn't take rocket surgery to figure out there really aren't any alternatives.
Right.
And I certainly am not one to want to create one. I mean, I just am done struggling. Mm-hmm. I can remember trying to lift a car with two other women, and We knew we probably wouldn't be able to do it. We just needed to move it about 5 inches. And we ended up laughing so hard that we couldn't even stand because we looked so stupid trying to lift this car.
Yeah.
And there's been many times in which the situation is so frustrating that it's funny. You know it's gonna be funny. We say to ourselves, one day we're gonna look back on this and laugh. And I'm like, why wait?
Right.
There's lots and lots of examples. This happened between me and Royce. We both used to smoke, and we were duplicate bridge players, and we would play bridge every night we could, and it started specifically at 7:30. We were running late, and in our haste, we'd forgotten to bring any cigarettes with us, which was going to be really difficult. And he was driving. He reached to his breast pocket. He said, "I've got 1 cigarette left. Let's smoke it on the way, and then we'll just deal with the evening." So I was angry already, and I took the cigarette, and I took a match, and I lit the cigarette and threw the match cigarette out the window of the car.
Oh, no.
And when you're upset, you do stupid things.
Right.
Royce looked on this 6-lane road and noticed there was no traffic directly behind us. So he put the car in reverse, and he meant for me to go get out and pick up that still burning cigarette that must have been on the ground. And we realized that this was absolutely ridiculous. And I said to him, "Could be worse, could be raining." And we started to laugh, and that laughter stopped our sniping at each other. And we went on ahead to bridge and won that night because we were in a good mood, where we'd been in a terrible mood 5 minutes before. And then later, because of smoking probably, Royce had a heart attack at 40. And when I got to the intensive care to see him, he was lying there, all the telemetry was behind him. What could I say? "You're gonna be okay?" I didn't know what to say. And I went over to him to kiss him. And he said to me, "Could be worse, could be raining." And that became we both laughed. And they realized he's gonna make it because he could find the humor in the situation as soon as possible. And so we use that phrase a lot. Could be worse, could be raining. And the times it was raining when we said that,
That's even funnier.
we would just laugh and laugh. Sometimes people are in another place, and rather than trying to get them out of their place to back to where they should be, how about going to their place and seeing what it's like? There's a story about a therapist who went into a mental hospital, and he was told would he like to talk to particular patients they thought were interesting. And one of them, they said, there's a woman that believes that Jesus is her boyfriend. There was another man who at the same hospital who claimed to be Jesus. And so this therapist was taken to him, and he said, "I understand that you love little children especially." And the guy, being Jesus, what could he say? He said, "Yes, I do." He said, "I understand that you're very good with your hands, and used to be a carpenter." And what could the guy say, being Jesus? "Oh, yeah, that's true." And he says, "Well, down on the 4th floor of this building is a children's ward, and they certainly do need bookcases. We were wondering if you could go down there, being a carpenter and loving children, if you could make some bookcases." And he said, "Fine." And in fact, he did, and left the mental institution eventually, still believing he was Jesus. And how wonderful. I mean, if everybody believed that, what a different world we would have. So rather than assuring him, no, he was not, why not just say, "Yes, I'm so glad you're here, Jesus," or "I'm so glad you're here, Wells. can you use your skills?
Right. Call yourself whatever you need to be useful.
Yes. And accept people's insane notions, because somewhere underlying there makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming that not that things are wrong, but that I'm looking at it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could only see it their way.
I mean, we're all looking at reality in a variety of skewed ways. Mm-hmm. None of us has our finger on the pulse.
Straight.
Exactly.
If you really think you're the prince, well, I'll treat you like a prince. I'm not going to take you down to a pauper and make your coping not work anymore.
Right.
The answer to everybody's problem is inside of them already.
Right.
They just haven't figured out a way to make it work for them.
Right.
So I enjoy wandering into people's worlds and wondering, I wonder why she's doing that. Mm-hmm. It makes sense at some level.
Sure.
Let me find that level.
Yeah. Where did Tookie come from?
I don't know. I've had it all my life.
You really don't know?
No, Mother was unclear about that. I think she said she had a parakeet named Tookie. I thought, that's good, parakeet. Great beginning.
That's
but
right.
The people that call me Tookie have special meaning to me, because obviously family calls me Tookie. I don't think you know of me as any other name.
No, I mean, I know you're Rosalie, but
yes,
no, but you're Tookie.
But I'm Tookie.
Yeah.
So I'm cool with being Tookie. I'm cool with being Blow. Mm-hmm. Why would anybody deliberately take that as their last name? It's nothing good about Blow. You can turn it any way you want. Mm-hmm. And you can blow lunch or blow up a bus or blow a test or blow all kinds of things.
Yeah,
nothing good about it. Royce took the name The Breeze from the song They Call Me The Breeze because it was the only thing he thought of that was positive about Blow. Mm-hmm. And it also suited his lifestyle. He was a breezy person. Mm-hmm. He never strived too hard because he survived Vietnam.
I know.
And he told me that once he survived that, he'd done all the struggling he was going to do.
Wow. I mean, that makes perfect sense.
And it's hard to know, was he PTSD'd or not? Right. Probably.
Right.
He lost half his hearing in Vietnam.
I know. Did he ever talk much about his experience there?
He didn't talk much about Vietnam, except to guys that had been in the military and they wanted to talk about it.
Right.
But he did tell me recently that he used to live 5 minutes at the time. He'd say, I just need to survive 5 more minutes, and then another 5 minutes, and did 2 years that way.
Good Lord.
Chopping it up like that.
He struck me as such a sweet man.
Oh,
such an incredibly
Mother said he was the sweetest man she'd ever met, and he played into that. He once she bought him something, and he paid her back, and he wrote the check to the most wonderful mother-in-law in the world, and so she had to endorse it that way in order to cash it. And he used to call her from work because he knew she'd be playing bridge with her buddies, and she could say, that was my son-in-law. He just called me to tell me he loved me. And, of course, the status among women about their sons-in-law, he knew that he was playing into that and made her look good.
Right. Well, good. Why not, right? Took very little effort. Took very little effort. Yeah, and made her happy.
Yep, made him happy, too.
Yeah.
Making people laugh, chuckle, happy, satisfied, just a little tiny bit better was what we were both about.
Yeah.
He vowed one time he worked with disabled Vietnam vets trying to find them jobs. And he said the odds of doing that were pretty slim, but that no one would leave his desk that didn't feel better than when they sat down. That if he couldn't help them find a job, he could make them feel better.
That's great. He always struck me as an observer. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, very quiet.
Quiet, soft-spoken, and observing.
Since he couldn't hear, so many times he'd say, "Fine, thank you, how are you?" regardless of what you said to him.
Yeah, that's right.
And pretend to hear. But he did hear some things, and he would make quirky remarks.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Now, he was a good one-liner, and he was a strange and wonderful person. I find that I gravitate towards unusual, quirky people.
Well, it takes one to know one.
Yes, it does. And I much enjoy people who are not part of the herd. They might be the black sheep, or they might be the lagger in behind, but I enjoy having them with me.
Do you feel like you're the black sheep?
Oh, absolutely. My father was amazed that a woman on her own could make a living, although he still was terrified I was going to call one day and say, "Daddy, I'm going to move back in with y'all." That was his biggest fear.
Was this during a time before you met Royce, when you were single?
Oh, no. He was okay with that, because when I met Royce, I was 25. They'd already run off 2 potential husbands and were now regretting it. And so when they met Royce, they were just glad that his knuckles didn't drag the ground and that he didn't drool. The fact that he could play bridge beautifully was an extra charm.
Yeah.
And it didn't take Daddy more than about 15 years to call Royce by name and to have a conversation with him and to recognize him. And but he was Mother's delight. Some of our rituals bear looking at. And funerals aren't the only one. Marriages are even more ridiculous than funerals. And when I hear young girls say, "This is the most important day of my life," I think how pathetic that is, that everything's downhill from there. And yet I do believe occasionally people still get married because they want a wedding. Not necessarily a life together, but a wedding. And if they don't want a wedding, it's their mom that wants the wedding that she never got. And so we frequently go through these rituals for other people and make sure that we do things correctly, not to upset our parents and others who have strict ideas about how things should be. And I'm like, what a waste of time.
And so much money.
And so much money. When I was diagnosed, we immediately looked up the cut rate crematorium, because we're not going to spend a lot of money on a funeral. You can get cremated for under $1,000, and the average funeral is, I'm going to imagine, up to $10,000, $12,000 or more. And so it just seems like a ridiculous waste of money. And the savings of that will go to our heirs and also to party to remember Royce.
Right.
I'd much rather do that than have a fancy satin-lined coffin. And so we found a cut-rate funeral place. And our funeral director was a 23-year-old girl who was so pale and blonde and innocent looking that it just struck me funny that this would be her job. And I figured she either was a relative of the owners or this was one of her first jobs. And she was very nice. She gave us condolences and all that strictly off her paper. When we finished, I said, "Well, I'll be seeing you in a few months." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I'm dying too, and y'all's service seems to be pretty good, so I hope I'll get back to see you."
Oh, poor thing, she's 23.
This poor girl at 23, we thought ashes are a burden if you don't know what to do with them. And so I have polled a lot of people. What are some cool things to do with ashes? Somebody suggested little hourglasses where you could participate in family game night by having some of your ashes put in an hourglass on a time thing. After Royce was cremated and we came home, The first thing Jerry wanted to do is see how much he weighed cremated.
Mm-hmm.
And so he pulled out the ashes and got on a scale, and Royce weighed 7.5 pounds cremated.
Wow.
And so I was thinking about, don't weigh me cremated. I don't want you to do that. He's like, well, if you don't want to weigh 7.5 pounds, you need to lose some weight before you die. The plan now is to give everything in this house away, if possible, and die with it empty.
Wow.
And I'm working on it, and if you go around the house, you'll see little yellow stickers.
I see people's names on your mirrors.
People's names on your mirrors, yes. And somebody looked at the TV and said, oh, well, I'll take that. And they can't even believe that they're going to get a free TV. What a cool thing.
That's funny.
And I realized that people go, don't you want to keep that? And I'm like, don't you know I'm going to die? I find this funny.
Yeah.
That people, there's some object around here that's got 3 names on it. If you don't want it, then I want it. If you don't want it, then I want it.
I see.
And so people have lost their etiquette.
Mm-hmm. Which you love.
I love
because
that.
etiquette is part of that.
It's like it's going.
Yeah.
And it makes them understand I'm dying. No, I don't want to save that. Why do I want to save that? I'm not going to be here.
Right.
I figure that my legacy, it's certainly not a whole bunch of money. My legacy, I think of, is people remembering that she laughed in the face of death, that she refused to be sad all the time, to be glum. You could say the C word. You could use the word cancer with me. Mm-hmm. Most people are scared to say it, and you can say die instead of passed away or succumbed or is in a better place. Mm-hmm. That's a pile. It really is. I die. Mm-hmm. We've had many conversations here about afterlife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm interested.
Almost like a salon of people who say, well, it could be like this, it could be like that. Delightful. Mm-hmm. A widow, a friend of mine, says a husband, Dave, is up there to get Royce, that they're hanging out together up there or wherever. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that either one of us believe that, but it's a nice thought.
Right.
What would they be doing if they were together in some afterlife?
Right.
And those are wonderful fantasies if people like to believe them. But I figure the default is that nothing happens. So anything that does is better than nothing. So
why is the default nothing, though? I'm so curious.
That I won't be disappointed.
I see.
If the default is nothing.
I see.
I certainly don't believe in hell. Mm-hmm. I do not believe that God is a punishing God. Mm-hmm. And so that's not a problem. Quite frankly, Wells, I've had such love and giving from my friends and family, some beyond what I could have ever imagined. Mm. That's been such a tremendous gift to me. Mm. This is an experience I wouldn't exchange for anything. Mm. I know that sounds weird, but the advantages of knowing you're going to die are very cool. Mm-hmm. And people are nice to you all the time. They bring you food. Mm-hmm. How cool is that? I don't have to wear a bra. It's my last chance to have a smoking hot body when I'm cremated. There's so many things I don't have to worry about because I'll be dead. Mm-hmm. Somebody else can worry about them. I never imagined there being a time in my life when I didn't have to worry about anything. And now I have no worries. So I really am fine with it. I think maybe I'm in giant denial and will suddenly start screaming. But no, I feel more comfortable than the people that come to visit me, than my friends do, about me. I'm less worried. It's like I've let go, and letting go is so wonderful. Mm-hmm. It's like taking off your shoes after a long day.
So if your life was summed up in a song and people you care about were able to experience you through music, what would you want them to experience?
I want them to experience the lightness of unburdening themselves from things they can't control and focusing on the things they can control. Is making the best out of their life, and that taking things too seriously doesn't mean you don't respect them, but there's always something positive or funny to see in the most horrible circumstances. That you do have control in places where you have no control, just by concentrating on what you can do about it, rather than worrying about what's happening that you can't control. I think operating in your place of control and finding comfort and humor in that, because humor is the great freedom. It's the freedom from the burden, responsibility.
Right, so in a way, like, you survey the world, and this is like in the organizations that hire you, it's in your family, it's in your friends, it's in your loved ones. You're scanning the world, and part of what you're seeing is people taking things too seriously. And you want to help people to lighten up.
People feeling stuck.
People feeling stuck, and that's related to this kind of heavy seriousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
All I want to do is bang their head a little bit so they can shake it loose and think of another way. So I can't help them think the right way, but I can help them think other ways.
Right. Yeah, free them up again. It's so focused. Your goal in life is so focused. And for me, knowing you my entire life, it's so obvious. I don't know. Absolutely. Absolutely. So clear to me that at Thanksgiving dinner, which is basically
where we see each other.
That's how I know you from, basically, is every Thanksgiving. I can't think of, my dad's wedding, other like
maybe
family.
Other ceremonies.
Family
and
celebrations, exactly. But in every one of those situations, there's a group of people and they're doing the thing that people do. And you come in from this perpendicular angle and, just drop a question into the space that all of a sudden puts people in this different part of themselves where they're talking more personally, more intimately, more philosophically, more questioning, more, people saying things like, oh, well, I think of you this way. Oh, well, I would have thought you would have answered this way to that question. I guess just, and yeah, there is this kind of irreverent tinge to it, but it always seems like to me it's serving this.
It's serving an exploration of things don't have to be the way they are.
Exactly.
Noticing how driven we are by our cultures, even though the behaviors are no longer useful.
Right.
We continue to do them anyway.
Your message is so consistent, and what keeps coming to mind is this idea of the court jester.
Oh, that is exactly my favorite.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because
when people
the king
have talked about, do I want to be the king? Do I want to be the queen? No, I want to be the jester.
Yeah.
Because the jester could insult the king. The jester is the only one who could deal with the official power and be in the juice, be in the power behind the throne, be in the person who makes the king laugh.
Right.
And can without getting his head cut off.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They can make fun of the king to his face, and often the king doesn't understand the jokes fully, but the people who hear them benefit from them.
And that you would hit on court jester because personality types and all of that is something part of my work and trade. Mm-hmm. And so saying what position do you want, if jester has not been an option, magician is the next option I would prove.
Makes
because
sense.
I'd love to make something out of nothing, or something transformative out of something mundane. Mm-hmm. Is my biggest delight. Telling people what to do, not so much.
Right. Yeah, there's something magician about the court jester. They're both bringing forward what's present but under the surface and bringing it to the surface so that everyone can see it.
Sometimes it just seems magic. I will use that term. How do
Sure.
you do that? Oh, it's just magic.
Absolutely.
The jester's also not responsible.
Right.
And it's not going to take the heat if things go bad.
Right.
How cool is that?
Yeah, and the jester's job is not to set up a new system. It's to point out what's wrong with the system.
Mm-hmm. And doing it in such a way, sometimes, like you said, they might not really understand what you're saying at some level, but it does maybe start a thought.
Exactly.
Yeah, jester is what it's all about.
It really is.
In the end, I think that our life is measured by how we treat other people, and actually all living things. I think animals are just as important as people, and respecting life is very important.
Where do you think you got that?
I don't know.
Where does that come
here
from?
and there, reading. I think noticing everything's connected. That everything fits in with every other thing, that somehow we're connected, has helped me with that. They know that I'm part of something, not myself, but part of, helps me a whole lot. I don't know, just my liberal schooling, my thinking.
Do you think of that as a spiritual perspective?
I think the connectedness, figuring out the connectedness and the cycles, and that everything depends on everything else. And if you take out one person, one thing, that it makes all the difference. So spiritually, I'm not so sure. I'm a thoughtful but not a conclusive thinker spiritually. It's imagining what could be that we can't know.
But the feeling when you think about the connectedness of all life, I guess that's in the realm that most people
That
would
has
think
to
of.
be a spiritual realm, because it's not anywhere else. Who knows? You can become all kinds of things through nature. You become food for a plant. And maybe you do come back as a bug if you were an exterminator in your earlier life. Or maybe you do keep coming back until you get it right. We can't even begin to wonder what lies ahead. And so that's why I'm not scared to die. I can't imagine anything worse. So it can't be anything but the same, and I don't think that's going to be the case. And it's just a matter of the unknown, which is so frightening to people. And but without the unknown, we also never get surprises. We never grow. We never change. And we do change. We do grow.
Absolutely.
And I think that just like in the what's going to happen next down there on Earth after I'm gone, and maybe it's not even down there, maybe it's around there, maybe it's under there, that I have to learn that curiosity isn't really worth it. That things will just go on. And so I'm less curious. I've stopped watching politics. Whoa, what a wonderful, wonderful relief. I care about
Sure.
what's left to our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, but not that much.
Well, also, your adventure is taking you elsewhere, you know?
Completely elsewhere, and I can't possibly know. There's a phrase from a song I like very much. It says, I love you in a place where there's no space and time.
I know that song.
It's a Song for You by Leon Russell.
That's right. Yeah,
It's
right.
maybe my favorite song of any. And the point of loving someone in a space where there's no place or time, there's no time, that I can remember old relationships that go back 40, 50, 60 years in which the person is not present, maybe the person's not alive, but I still love them. Well, how can you love them in a place where there's no space or time?
Yeah.
And that really means a lot to me, that particular way of thinking at things, and that there is a place where there's no space and time. And that's where I'm going.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, we gathered in Greensboro for Tookie's big send-off. She sat and listened and drank it all in while her friends and family shared stories about her and said their final goodbyes. One of her bridge-playing buddies asked people to share one adjective they would use to describe Tookie, and mine was irreverent. As the celebration was coming to a close, it came time for me to share the song I wrote for Tookie, and I took a moment first to share my adjective. I addressed her irreverence toward the status quo and organized religion and outworn rules and outmoded ways of doing things. I also felt moved to share the story of Could Be Worse, Could Be Raining, as an example of how important it was to her to laugh in the face of adversity, and how that phrase, could be worse, could be raining, had helped her and Royce through so many difficult times together. So much of what was said that day fit beautifully into the idea of the jester, so I brought that forward too, and I shared how much Tookie had loved thinking of herself that way. I told how it had been helpful to me while writing her song to try to imagine how a court jester might say goodbye. The townspeople and the king and all the nobility gathered there to bid farewell to that strange and lovable character who had become such a fixture in the life of the kingdom. The room filling with anticipation as we wait to hear the final address of the beloved jester, who has surprised us with inappropriateness and insight, who's helped us see things from a new angle and made us irritated and uncomfortable when we bore the brunt of the jokes. But most importantly, who's made us laugh and helped us forget about our problems for a while. And now, a hush falls over the crowd as the jester takes the stage and begins to speak. Someone once said, don't waste your time on the dead. There are things you can't control. Just don't let them weigh on your soul. It's while we're here, we can let it show. Say what we need to say before they go. Before I go, what I want you to know is that as awful as it may seem, there's no need to cry and scream. Just take a chill, give up your straining. It could be worse, it could be raining. Better off do something for someone still around. Lighten someone's load, wouldn't that be cool? help them to approach the unknown, the frightening and mysterious, with a joke or a laugh. It doesn't have to be so serious, not so serious. So before I'm dead, please get it into your head that the sky is not falling down and the king has got no clothes. And while there are those who'll try explaining, it's best to see it all as entertaining. So shed your worry, it was only draining. It could be worse, it could be raining. Before I go, I hope you'll know that dying's not so bad. Everyone must go, one day even you. And while we hope for heaven and fret about hell, which is just such a pile, you know the measure of a life well lived is if you made somebody smile. The hellfire and damnation is such an awful crock, you know. I may never have been saved, but think of what I've saved at the cut-rate crematorium for just $800. I'll be relieved of all but 7 pounds, and I'll remain with 0 fear and regret. Before I go, what I want you to know is that I love you in a place where there's no time or space, and I don't know how, but I think it's true that when I'm there, I'm everywhere too, which means that I'll be here with you. So don't be sad, don't start complaining. It could be worse. It could be raining. A few days after Tookie's celebration, I got word from my dad one morning that she had died. She had a pain-free death, and she got to live long enough to fulfill her wish of a big send-off. I'm not sure if it's important for everyone to attend their own funerals, but it was important for Tookie, and she made it happen. In true court jester fashion, she used her final public act to challenge convention and show people that there are different ways of doing things. Tookie lived life her own way, and her death was no exception. I'm glad I had someone in my family who was eccentric or a black sheep, and I'm forever grateful for the time we shared. Behind Tookie's personal wish to attend her own funeral is a gentle nudge to all of us to identify those people in our lives who we love in a place where there's no space and time. And if possible, to say what we need to say before we go. Thanks for listening to I Wrote This Song For You. Please consider supporting this podcast on Patreon. You can find the link on my website, iwrotethissongforyou.com. This episode is dedicated to the memory of Rosalie and Royce Blow, with a huge debt of gratitude from all our family to Michael Hobson and Keith Jeffcoat for planning and executing Tookie's farewell party, and especially to Jerry Cartwright, who took such good care of Tookie and Royce in their final months. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.